Awesome. All right, so let's pick it up. We're on page 85. And we are at the second full paragraph. We're right near the bottom of the page. I say second full paragraph. It's near the bottom, not near the top. And it's right where it says much has already been said. And so this is where we begin to transition into step 11, which I don't know about you guys, but for me, this is an exciting part of the book. So as we transition into step 11, bottom of page 85, it says much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from him who has all knowledge and power. You see, I don't know about you, but for me, when I came to that first step, I saw that I did not have any power. This is a really important step one understanding. The first step is to deeply and truly understand that I will relapse. I need to stay sober. I have to stay sober, but there's nothing that I can put in between me and that first drink or that first drug or that first whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study today. There's nothing that I can put between me and that. And it's talking about him who has all knowledge and power. Doesn't have to be a him. That's just old-timey conventions. But there is a power that is available. There's a power upon which I can build a relationship, and I don't have that power. What I am going to do is I'm going to seek that power. I'm going to build a relationship with that power. And man, if I don't have much strength, inspiration, and direction, it makes sense that that's where I would go to get it, right? And that's what I'm after. I'm after that strength that is not my strength, that is God's strength, that inspiration. And man, well, you know what that inspiration looks like? It looks like intuitively handling situations which used to baffle us. You know, when you're like, actually, we got the driver is a deranged lunatic thing, right? It's like, you know, when you drive and you're just able to like drive responsibly and not flip anyone off. That is an example of inspired thinking. I mean, we can have much higher inspired thinking, but sometimes it is. I didn't flip anyone off. I don't drive, so it's a lot easier for me to say that than some of you guys are like, Paige, you don't know. I'm like, I don't drive. That's fair. But him who has all knowledge and power. And if there's a power that has that complete knowledge and that complete power, why would I not turn to that? And this, it says, if we have carefully followed directions. So let's ask ourselves, if we are at step 11, if we're at this place, we can ask ourselves, did I carefully follow directions? If I'm not sure, am I missing something? Did I leave something off? Am I not sure if I'm beginning to have the spiritual experience? We can ask ourselves, we have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. At step 11, here on page 85, am I beginning to feel that flow of his spirit into me? Again, it doesn't have to be gendered, but am I feeling the flow of a power come into me that I did not feel before? If no, that's not, you're doing it wrong, you suck. No, if no, we can go back. There's some directions. There's things we're missing. It's not a shameful proposition, but that is what we're coming to experience as we approach this 11th step. And when we talk about that, the sense of the flow of his spirit into us, a lot of times I talk about like my whole soul job, goal, responsibility is to get me out of the way. Absolutely. Get as much Paige out of the way as humanly possible and let God flow through me. That's what I'm trying to do. And when I'm scared and when I'm, unsure of a spiritual action, get me out of the way and let God flow through me. And the St. Francis prayer that's referenced in step 11 in the 12 and 12 really talks about that. Make me a channel of thy peace. Let that power, that peace, that serenity, that understanding flow through me. So it says, to some extent, we have become God conscious. And I'm going to talk about that word a bit. And for some of you that just joined me, I'm like, oh, I'm off on an etymology tangent. Please don't leave. I get all jazzercised about etymology, which is the study of words. And if you guys remember, the chapter that was devoted to step 2 was entitled We Agnostics. And the word agnostic is Greek in its origin. Ag means without, and gnosis means knowledge. But if you're wondering, the gnosis of agnostic is not a head intellectual knowing. We talk about when we're sponsoring people or we're being sponsored and we're telling our sponsors, yeah, I know. Yeah, Paige, I know. You know what I mean? It is not that sort of, yeah, I know. The knowing is that deep heart level knowing. And when I come to the second step, I might have faith, I might have belief, I might have a religion that I'm bringing to the table, but I am without that deep heart level knowing. And that's not to say I might not have had experiences of God before I got here. But what that's saying is I don't have that relationship. I don't have that access to that power. Now you'll notice step 11, it says God conscious, and that we seek to improve our conscious contact with God. The word conscious is Latin in origin. So a completely different language group, completely different. This is a coincidence, or is it? But a completely different language group. And in Latin, welcome, glad you're here. We're on page 85. In Latin, the word con means with. And the word chas, or the root of that is sire, means knowing. So on step 2, I am without knowing of this power. I don't have that relationship with this power. Now at step 11, what I begin to have is that with knowing, that deep experience of this power. What happened between 2 and 11? Spoilers, the steps. That's what happened. I made my decision to work 4 through 9. I worked 4 through 9. I continue to keep that channel clear in 10. That's what's happening. And some of you guys know that how could I not mention Carl Jung? Carl Jung was the eminent psychiatrist who gave us knowledge of what our solution is in 12 step. And in 12 step, the solution that we have to our illness is a spiritual awakening. And there's this famous BBC interview where they're interviewing Dr. Carl Jung. And they ask him, hey, growing up, did you believe in God? And Carl Jung says, yeah, growing up, I believed in God. And they ask him, do you believe in God now? And Carl Jung says, no. And there's a pause. And then he says, I've got no need for belief. There's another pause. And he says, I know. And that is the knowing that we're after here. It's not that we were talking about the eclipse right before the meeting, and we were talking about how the nature of the eclipse is ineffable. So I didn't see it. I'm out of the path of I'm on the western side of the continent, so I wasn't in the path, and then I missed it. Typical Paige. And so some of you guys were trying to explain it to me and tell me about it. But it's not the same as experiencing it. And when we talk about God or higher power or spirituality or prayer and meditation, we use a lot of things like metaphors because we're trying to describe that which is indescribable. Describe the love that you feel for your spouse. Describe the love that you feel for your children. Describe the smell of a rose. You know what I mean? It is indescribable. It is that which must be experienced. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to experience this power. So it says we have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, which is a sense of knowing, is it not? Right? Like we know what textures feel like. We know what things taste like. We know what things look like. This becomes this deeper knowing becomes a vital, which is life-giving sixth sense. And it says, but we must go further. And that means more action. Oh, God. This whole into action chapter, it's a little heavy on the action. Man, I was going to say, when is the resting on our laurels chapter? I always love to talk about that. When is the when is the just have a nap? Well, we did get a quiet hour, so we can't complain too hard. Although there was some productive work that happened in that quiet hour. So it says, step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. Now, keep in mind, I always point out it is a suggestion, but we do not have alternative suggestions. If you're like, I don't like that one, that's cool. But the only alternative we have to prayer and meditation and all the suggestions, the 12 steps, is the alcoholic death spoken about on the bottom of page 25. So that's the alternative, but it is a suggestion. Also, I don't know about you, but when I got here, I saw that step 11 and I really read it. Prayer and or meditation. You know what I mean? I was reading it and or. It was a little loosey-goosey. I could do what I want. No, it is and, not and or, prayer and meditation. We're going to talk about that meditation here in a bit. So it says we shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly, which means this is a thing that works throughout my day, as I go throughout my day constantly. It also tells me that this is not a once in a while sort of thing, that this is a really, truly how we live our lives. And this is important. It works. It works. It does. And that is not something we can argue. It works. But what do I need for it to work? I need to have the proper attitude and work at it. So I need to have consistency with this thing. I need to be doing it on a daily basis. And what's the proper attitude? Well, we spoke quite a lot about this idea that, like, I can't be going around praying for a pony. God, get me. I can't remember where it was, but I made the joke about, like, the type of prayer that we have is not that, God, get me a pony. And I can't BS God and be like, it's a service pony. It's Clip Clop, my service pony that will take me around to do service. No, it is, God, let me be of service to you and my fellows. Show me how I can help. Remove from me the defects that are in the way of my usefulness to others. That's the sort of prayer. And the sort of meditation, we're gonna talk about that here in a bit. I keep saying we're gonna talk about that in a bit. So clearly, I'll just talk about it now, because I'll just tie that thread. A lot of times we hear in the rooms that meditation didn't mean meditation in the 1930s. And that's sort of true if the only thing I do is look up meditation in the 1930s dictionary, which I have, which is fun. Again, if you're new to this study and you're like, it's fun looking up things in the dictionary, listen, I can't, yeah, some of you guys are like, heck yeah, my homies with the highlighters, you guys know what's up, yeah. But if we look up meditation in the dictionary, in the 1930s dictionary, it says to think or to contemplate. So it's that intellectual exercise. Now, if that is all I do with the word meditation, I might think it is simply thinking about it. Now, I am a giant nerd, and I really enjoy the book Varieties of Religious Experiences, which is a series of lectures. Now, there's a number of books that are alluded to and maybe borrowed from a little bit in this book, but Varieties of Religious Experiences is the only book within the first 164 pages which is specifically referenced. And I cannot say that meditation did not exist and know that book exists. So that book is not a meditation book, but in that book, it describes a variety of meditative practices or people who had meditative practices. So it references St. Teresa of Avila, who had a prayer that was a well-known meditation practice. And she, her homie, St. John of the Cross, who again had a different meditative practice. They spoke of the Quakers, who had their prayer of quiet, and they spoke of the Quietism movement, who had similar things. And for those that are like, hey, there wasn't guided meditation in the 1930s. Well, it references a book called Philothea, or Introduction to the Devout Life by Saint Francis de Sales, which was a guided meditation book, which is not to say that you have to do these meditations. But what I'm saying is that if I say there was no meditation in the 1930s, it was very simply thinking about things, I'm missing what would have been available at that time and readily available at that time. And in fact, Father Ed Dowling, who really became Bill Wilson's spiritual advisor, reached out to Bill Wilson because he was like, hey, you know this, when you retire at night and upon awakening stuff, were you aware that a lot of this is very similar to St. Ignatius' spiritual practices? And Bill was like, no, because they're just two random things that happened in parallel, because that happens. And these practices mirror the examen of conscience. By the way, you don't have to know any of these or like any of these, but I just want to point out that the meditation that was available in the 1930s, if I did any seeking just slightly outside of the Oxford group, I could find some. So if you like seeking in a whole variety of different ways, do it. Do it. There were a bunch of meditation techniques that were available. Now, the Oxford group, fair enough. They didn't have that typical meditation practice that we might know of it now. What they did was a type of meditation that was known as two-way prayer. You can read more about it. There's a book called When Man Listens, and it describes it's the two-way prayer. There's a website on it called twowayprayer.org. But essentially what you do is you write out a question. And then what you do is you sit in stillness and you sit in silence for a period of time. Or before you do that, sorry, you read a piece of spiritual literature, whatever you feel called to. And then you sit in that meditative stillness and in that silence, and then you have a period of writing. And you write whatever comes to mind, starting with the term of endearment, like my love, my beloved, my dear, my child. And you don't self-edit. Whatever comes to mind, you write it down. And if you feel stalled out, you start again with the term of endearment and you continue to write. You do that for 5 to 7 minutes. And then after those 5 to 7 minutes, you sit in God's presence for another period of stillness. And so that's what meditation looked like in the Oxford group. Now, not everyone can do that style of meditation. And that's the only style of meditation I would say not everyone can do, because it's not always good for people that have a history of psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia or delusions or that sort of thing. I always want to preface that. But there's a variety of meditation practices. So yeah, I think that's what I was going to say about that. Just that idea that man, the realm of spirit, it's broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding. For those who earnestly seek, what I am called to do is seek. And that's really what step 11 is about. It's about that seeking, that growing, that conscious contact with God. So it works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. So this is the first suggestion, and this is what's known as evening review. And it says when we retire at night. And you know what is interesting about the evening review process is in the original manuscript, this did not say when we retired at night. This was a morning suggestion. So if there's anyone here today that struggles with evening review and struggles with getting that routine going, if it would be easier, you don't need to do it in the evening. I have some sponsees that do it in the morning or do it on their lunch hour. What matters, all of that to say is when I do my evening review does not matter. As long as I'm reviewing the past 24 hours, what matters is that I do my evening review. That's what matters. And a lot of times this is when we retire at night and we think, man, I got to do it right before I go to bed. Listen, I'm not super functional right before I go to bed. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's good to do it right before you're going to watch television, before you unwind for the night. Do you know what I mean? It's often not productive to have it the exact last thing because you're kind of sleepy and you're like, I don't want to do it. And it's easy to put off. So I just wanted to share that. So it says, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. So the purpose of the evening review is to constructively review our day. We're not here to beat ourselves up. We're not here to be in shame. We are trying to see what we have done and really what's been blocking us off from God. So it's the first direction is, so we constructively review our day. Now, I'm just going to share with you how I do my evening review before I kind of get into it. I'll just share this with you guys. Oh, did I do it? Oh, I didn't mean to still have me here. I was going to do it without me there. I learned a new thing and then I forgot how to turn it off. Anyway, this is the format. It comes right from this book where I break down what I do. The first for me is I constructively review my day. So for me, what I do is I put pen to paper and I write what I did that day. Some of you guys that know me and have been coming to the study a while, you can tell that it's hard for me to remember what happened because I'm all over the place. You know what I mean? And I need to start with that sort of process to even remember what happened. Now, one of the things I will point out is I put pen to paper on my evening review. That is what I do. It does not tell us to put pen to paper on the evening review. And it was possibly a meditative practice. But here's what I found out. See, when I was getting really into step 11 in Calgary, Alberta, I don't know what year it was because I'm terrible with time orientation and remembering what happened and when things happen, which is why I got to write it down. But I'll tell you, the people who had what I wanted, the people who were full of joy, the people who were excited to be sober, the people who had that light on in their eyes, they put pen to paper on their evening review. And that was what I did. I'm not saying that's right, and I'm not saying there aren't people that do it as a meditative practice that don't get the benefits from it. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is in that small period of time, there were people who were a demonstration of this program, and I just picked it up doing it the way they did. So for me, I write down what I did that day because I don't remember, and it's really helpful to, but that's, again, if you wanted to do pen to paper and maybe some meditation, you could do that meditative review of your day before you write. Then, and I'm going to screen share it again, but just bear with me. It says, were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? And we can make a little note. Let's go back and have a look at step 10. So back on page 84 and the directions for our 10th step, it says continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And what we're seeing is that this evening review is a continuation of the process that we started in step 10. I talk about it being like a series of safety nets. Because listen, if I ever get my house as messy as my spiritual house, some of you guys know the hoarder's house metaphor, but if I ever let my spiritual house get as messy and cluttered as it did when I got here, I will relapse. And so as I go throughout my day, I will make messes. I mean, I've spilled some stuff right before the study. It's like, whoopsie doops, I got to pick that up. And so that's what the 10th step is. It allows me to pick it up in the moment. But if I didn't catch it, I missed it. The evening review allows me to catch it, to deal with it, to clean it up so that I don't have to carry it into the next day and into the next and into the next. And it's important for me to understand the evening review is not a punitive process. It is a process that allows me to live in peace and ease and freedom. That's what this is about. And so were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid, you'll notice that we're looking at the exact same things. And so I'm going to pop this up. And how I do it is if I was resentful, I don't just write down, yes, I was resentful and they were all jerks and I hate them, because that's not useful. That's just me making a grudge list. Well, we know what to do with the grudge list. So if I have a resentment, what I do is I take it through the resentment columns. See, it doesn't make sense that I would approach some of those monster resentments that I had at my very first 4-step, those ones that I didn't think I could ever get freedom from. And I utilize the columns. I begin to see them in a whole new way. I begin to get, man, it doesn't make sense that I wouldn't do that with the jerk at the meeting who was sharing too long, or the jerk neighbor who was being a jerk, or the jerk in traffic. It doesn't make sense that I wouldn't utilize these columns. So if I have a resentment, I then take it through the columns, because that's how I get freedom from it. If I was selfish, I write on that selfishness. If I was dishonest, I write about where I was dishonest. I'll let you guys know I've always been pretty decent with cash register honesty. I wasn't stealing a whole bunch of stuff. But where my dishonesty looks like today is, oh yeah, everything's fine. Or it looks like me saying yes when I needed to say no. It looks like overcommitting myself. It looks like not honoring what my limitations are. It looks like a lot of that self-seeking, doing things that to get your value and worth. And if I was afraid, what do I do? Well, it doesn't do any good to say, yes, I had a lot of fear of a lot of stuff. If I was afraid, I take it through the columns. See, the columns that I pick up in step 4, I don't put them down once I've done that 4th step. I utilize them in the 10th step when I talk to somebody, and I utilize them in my evening review. And for me, that's a big part of why it's such a pen to paper thing for me, because I got to pen to paper it through the columns. I'm not saying you can't use the app. I know there are people that use the app. I'm a pen to paper gal because I'm a stationary nerd. And it does wire things in your brain differently. I used to be a tutor. That should scare people. But there is something about handwritten notes that just rewires your brain in a different way. So if those things pop up, that's what I do. I take it through the columns. And then going back to the writing, it says, have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? I can see on the screen as well. I could probably keep the screen share up. So I'm used to it. I'm used to it being just the screen, and sometimes it feels a little overwhelming. But I guess if I'm here too, that I can hang out, unless I'm in the way. But I can't tell if oh, good. Okay, cool. You say that, and it's like I clearly have trust issues, because I'm like, there's no way I'm not in the way, Rob. I'm in the way. All right. Trusting. All right. So have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? And a lot of times that's that, like, hey, were things building up? Do I have a secret that I'm keeping from my sponsor or my spiritual advisor? I make a note of it. And the reason I make a note of it is so that I can hold myself accountable and go let that person know. Or sorry, before that, it says, do we owe an apology? And that same thing. Through the inventory process, or just knowing on my heart or in my gut that I owe an apology. Again, I make a note of it so I can go out and make that amends and make it right. And I got to write it down. Maybe you guys are real good at being always willing to make amends, but sometimes I just got to write it down so I hold myself accountable. Similarly, have I kept something to myself which should be discussed with another person at once? What that looks like, is there things that I'm keeping to myself that I need to share with my sponsor? Or do I have any unmade amends? Or do I have inventory I haven't taken to people that I really know in my heart I need to? And then the next one is, were we kind and loving toward all? You'll notice I wrote on the little page that all is in all caps, because it is the all that gets me. Now, my former sponsor, she was like, listen, if you were nice to people outside, it doesn't matter if you were judging them internally, but that's not my experience. My experiences was I kind of loving toward all in my actions, but also in my thoughts, because I have to live inside here. You know what I mean? I don't want it to be a big messy place. And man, it's the all that gets me, but it is the all that allows me to grow. What could we have done better? Now, what we could have done better is not meant to beat myself up. It's not meant to like self-flagellate or anything like that. What could I have done better? That what could I have done better is something that we can take to our prayer life in the morning. So if I could have been more kind, tolerant, patient, loving, I can ask for that in my morning prayers. If I've been sitting on some step work, sitting on an amends, sitting on some inventory, I can ask God for the willingness, right? What could we have done better? And then it says, were we thinking of ourselves most of the time, or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? And we're going to see that this is a real theme that we're going to pick up in the later chapters. It is no longer about what I can get, but what I can give. How can I give to others? Was I thinking about me or others? Again, it's not about beating myself up or being mean to me. It is about what can I give to those around me? And this is important, but we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. See, in this third step, I got fired from the management position of my life, and I agreed to go work for God. And what that looks like is to work these 12 steps as a way of life. Like my life depends on it because it does, but to be of love and service, to be of love and service to all those that I might come in contact with. That is what I'm called to do. And listen, maybe you guys are just nice to yourselves automatically. I can't tell you how long it took me to get to any sort of freedom from self-hatred. It was a lot of consistent actions. Beating myself up leads only to further self-centeredness. That's my experience. That self-centeredness, that shame, that doesn't make me useful. We're just trying to see, again, fact-finding, fact-facing, just like in step 4, to see the truth. Now it says, after making our review, we ask. Anytime in this book it says we ask, that is a prayer. So here's a prayer. After making our review, we pray. We ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. Now, again, I don't know about you, but the God that I have begun to experience as the result of these 12 steps is not a God that's sitting there mad at me. It's not like pissed that I made a mistake or pissed that I was imperfect and is waiting for me angrily to ask for forgiveness. That's really not the God that we have here in Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or Drug Addicts Anonymous or 12-step in general. That's not the God that's here. So why does it say we ask for God's forgiveness? Well, I don't know about you, but my experience with so many of my amends that I went to go make them, and they were like, oh, don't even worry about that. You know what I mean? It was only until I asked for that forgiveness that I realized I had already been forgiven. And I believe that's exactly what we're talking about here. And then when it talks about inquiring what corrective measures should be taken, what a beautiful place to try some two-way prayer if you're thinking about giving it a try. God, what corrective measures should be taken? And I can take that to two-way prayer. I can take that to meditation. And so that's our evening review. And again, I call it evening review because I know that there are some people that call it step 10, because if you look on the board, or even the 12 and 12, it kind of sounds like that should be a step 10 activity. But you'll notice that it's in step 11. And I stay out of the debating society. And what I do, I cease fighting anything or anyone. I'm gonna call it evening review because it doesn't really matter what I call it. It matters if I do it. Do you know what I'm saying? I could be absolutely correct. I call it the right thing. Doesn't matter if I don't do it. That internal spiritual house, ooh, it's going to get messy and I'm going to relapse. That's my experience. If I don't do this work consistently, I don't know about you, but for me, the inside gets a little crunchy and the outside gets a little gray. You know what I mean? And the world just doesn't start looking, and it's not me. They're not doing what I think they need to be doing. You know what I mean? Everyone's doing it wrong, which is a clear sign that I am off the beam, but I can't see it until I do that inventory. So that's what I do for evening review. Now it says on awakening. And so these are the directions for what we can do in the morning. And it says, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day before we begin. Now, this is a prayer we ask. So again, lots of prayers here in this whole step 11, shocking. And it's going to ask us to do some meditation. It's going to ask us to sit in quiet. Weird that they'd have these directions in the whole section on prayer and meditation. Wild. So we ask God to direct our thinking, especially that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. So that is a prayer. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. And that is a powerful, sneaky little promise. For those that have been coming a while, you guys know I love my sneaky little prayers, my sneaky little promises. Man, and so what it's pointing to is in the Oxford group, and again, it's that book, When Man Thinketh, When Man Listens. It's when God speaks and then man listens, but the When Man Listens, it describes what the two-way prayer looked like. And it wasn't about shutting down thoughts in the original two-way prayer. What it was listening for the thoughts below the thoughts. The thoughts that were more likely to be the voice of God. Now, something I forgot to mention was that idea of thought. If we were to get any guidance in our two-way prayer, we would hold it up to the four absolutes. Now, the four absolutes were these principles of the Oxford group, the Oxford movement, because again, we're talking about the Oxford group, what they used to do. And the four absolutes are absolute love, absolute unselfishness, absolute honesty, and absolute purity. Now, before you get a little nervous that I said absolute purity, it is purity of motive. I know some of you are like, whoo, thank goodness. And here's the thing. If I get any direction or an idea or an inspiration, and especially about romantic things, if I'm not sure whether it's from God or not, if I hold it up to those absolutes, it may not be from God, but it's more likely to be a good idea than if it does not live up to those absolutes. And just something else that I want to share, when we talk in step 2 about we got to let go, get rid of our old ideas. Man, the most common old ideas that I've found are about meditation. How often have we said, or I've been the person or heard in meetings, I can't meditate. My mind wanders. Yeah, that's what the brain does. That's everybody's brain. The brain is an organ that its sole purpose is to think. It is a thinking organ. And also, you guys know me, I'm all over the place. If I can meditate, I promise anyone can. But a lot of times we think a meditative practice is sitting in perfect stillness. And then we're like, oh, man, I've messed it all up. I'm thinking and my mind's wandering. And, yeah, that's what it does. So I want to really make clear meditation is not sitting in perfect stillness. Meditation is coming to that place of quiet where we're focusing on something specific, like an anchor, like our breath, maybe even focusing on our thoughts. And then our mind wandering, us noticing and bringing it back. That is the process of meditation. See, I cannot meditate if I don't have practice bringing my mind back to the anchor. So if my mind doesn't wander, I can't meditate. How does that not reframe this practice that I'm like, I can't do? No, you're doing it. And a couple weeks ago after the study, we were talking about various meditation practices, and we were talking about this way of centering prayer. And we were talking about the gentleman who introduced it to the modern consciousness. It was a 15th century meditation technique. So again, meditation has been around for a while, that was lost and then refound. And the gentleman was sharing it with people. And he shared it with a woman, and she was like, "Oh, it was just terrible, terrible. I had 10,000 thoughts the whole time." And the gentleman who was teaching it said, "How beautiful. That is 10,000 surrenders to God." And if I approach meditation in that way, does this now become a beautiful, practical experience as opposed to, I can't do it? And it's got to be a practice. And also, just while I'm off on this tangent, if you're trying to get into, really working the prayer life, really working the meditation life, my suggestion is start small. Start with 1 to 2 to maybe 3 minutes a day, but do it consistently. And from there, it will grow. It's real hard if I'm like, listen, I'm going to do 20 minutes. I got it. I can do it. Oh, it's hard to start there, but we can grow there and we can get there. But I got to start small and build some consistency. So it is a daily thing that we got to do. So also, when it talks about our thought life placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives, I don't know about you, but left to my own devices, this is how I wake up in the morning. So this is on my own power, on my own will. It is, oh, F word. I effing hate myself. Oh, I can't believe I'm alive. I effing hate myself. I should be dead. What's the point? That is what I wake up to on my own power. Now, with some consistency with prayer and meditation, I remember, I can't tell you exactly what day of the week it was or what year it was, but I remember the moment as I'm coming into consciousness, I'm waking up, and what my thoughts were doing was praying. That seemed impossible for somebody like me. And all that it required for me to do is this work. And my whole thought life was radically transformed. It's an incredible thing to go from where, when you have these thoughts, like I'm such a piece of garbage, but it's a swear word that I'm not going to say, that's like right there. And I think that it's real. But the more that I do this, the more that I'm like, oh, look, there's a thought. There's separation between me and my thoughts, me and my feelings, and I can see them. And in that space that allows a pause, and in that pause, I'm able to bring more and more of God into it. And see, that's the process. So it says, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. People like us, indecision? Oh, yeah. All right, so it says here, we ask God. Again, that's another prayer. We ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, or decision. We relax and take it easy. If you remember on page 61, it talked about how we were under the delusion that we could rest, satisfaction, and happiness if we only manage well. That rest is the root of wrestle, which is to take by force. But now we relax and take it easy because God's got it. Higher power's got it. Creator's got it. Spirit of the universe has got it. We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. And see, we're pointing to some of that two-way prayer. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. See, this is how we begin to live our life. It is immensely practical. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we'll find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. That sneaky little promise. Now, part of what we're going to, there's a beautiful reference in the 12 and 12, and it's a story in step 2. It's on page 136 to 138. And Bill Wilson, he was doing some 12-step work at the Towns Hospital. And Charles Towns, now he is an unsung hero. We give Silky, the little guy behind Rob, we give Silky a lot of credit, and we ought to. But man, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Charles Towns. And Charles Towns, who's the owner of the Towns Hospital, was like, Bill, why don't we let you move this whole 12-step stuff you're doing into an office in here and we'll pay you? And Bill was like, oh, that's such a good idea. But on the face of it, he was like, why, yes, let me think about that. But he's like, good idea, Charles. I'm really broke. I could use the money. Heck yeah, Chuck, I'll talk to Lois about it and I'll be right back. You know what I mean? And so he goes home and he tells Lois about it. But on the way on the subway, there was a line, it was a quote from the Bible, which is that a laborer is worthy of his hire. And it's like, oh, that's an inspired thought. It must be from God. See, it's God's will that I work here. And he goes and he tells Lois, and Lois isn't excited as he feels she should be. And he goes and shares it at the meeting, and he can watch at the meeting as the faces of all these drunks fall, and they're like, oh no. And one alcoholic had the courage to say, man, you can't do that. You see, if you start working at Towns Hospital, you'll tie up AA with that hospital. And, we might not survive being tied in together with this hospital. What you say to work as a lay therapist is completely ethical. But Bill, haven't you always said that good is the enemy of the best, and you can't take that job? And so that is the idea, kind of tying in that, like, hey, we might have these ideas and we might yes, it's God's will, but in step 5, it talks about a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. It's often important to run these things by people, God-centered spiritual people. I have a sponsee, I was talking with her about how it's important to take fourth dimension things to fourth dimension people who are doing this, who are working this way of life. Anywho, so we usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer. Again, prayers. And period of meditation. So it is meant to be a meditative practice, a prayer, that we be shown all throughout the day what our next step is to be, that we be given what we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will and are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. You can easily see why. So there's a difference between God, help me to be patient, kind, tolerant. God, help me to be honest. Help me to be of service to the sponsee. Help me to know how I can be of use at work or use to my family. Versus, God, get me Clip-Clop, my service pony. You know what I mean? Quite a difference. God, get me a boyfriend. I promise I'll be a really good 12-step member if I just have a relationship to fixate on. You know what I mean? That's not what we're doing. But I mean, to be fair, if you want a relationship, there's nothing wrong with that. But God, we can take our sex ideal and take that to prayer. That's a practical thing to do. And God, make me the type of person that my future partner would need me to be. Far better prayer than get me a boyfriend. And just if you're wondering, God, not Tinder. God also, not a vending machine, where it's like I come to prayer, E5, get me what I want. Also, now when I heard this, I bristled with antagonism. I wasn't a fan of this one when I heard it. God is not a painkiller. I was like, what? You see, there are times where I am meant to feel pain. And God will give me comfort in the pain, but man, I'm not going to God like I am aspirin. You know what I mean? I'm going with God. That idea of, I talk quite a bit about like God is a relationship, right? If I only go to somebody when I'm hurting, we're not going to feel very connected, are we? They might feel, and God, believe me, God's big enough to handle this, but that idea of I might not feel connected, right? If I go to that person on a daily basis to spend time with them, to speak with them, to listen to them, to clear away the things that are between us, to build and cultivate that relationship. And then when I'm in pain, I share it. It's a little bit different. So yeah, God's not a painkiller. But man, I want you to know when I heard it, I was like, what? Got a little bristly with that old antagonism. Anyway, so if circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. If we belong to a religious denomination which requires a definite morning devotion, we attend to that also. So if you have some ways in which your religious path, your spiritual path encourages you to grow in the mornings, do it. And that's what's so cool about this thing. If I am rooted in this, if I'm rooted in these directions of the 12 steps, man, I can grow in all these other directions and I can try new things. And man, step 11 becomes a whole lot of fun. I'm going to do new things, try new things. It's so fun and exciting, but I've got to be rooted in this. And a lot of times people talk about, oh, I read on awakening every morning. And that is a beautiful, wonderful practice. But what might be of a little bit more use is to do on awakening every morning, not just read it. So if circumstances weren't, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation, which I love that idea of we don't have to do this alone. It can be a communal thing. It can be a family thing. If we belong to a religious denomination which requires a definite morning devotion, we attend to that also. If not members of religious bodies, we sometimes select and memorize a few set prayers which emphasize the principles we have been discussing. There are many helpful books also. Suggestions about these might be obtained from one's priest, minister, or rabbi. Be quick to see where religious people are right, make use of what they offer. Man, I don't know about you. I took that and I'm like, that is license. Off I go. I'm going to try these different meditations. I'm going to do these different prayers. I'm going to engage in these different spiritual practices and ceremonies. And man, it has been so enriching for me to do that. And there is a lot of joy in this. And of course, I'm always rooted in this, but it's so cool when you do a little spiritual seeking and you kind of see that if there's truth, and it can be found. You know, it's that idea that these directions in step 10 last week, step 11 this week, anything we read in this book, man, it is not in opposition of any healthy spirituality. And it's saying, man, if you have a morning practice, do that as well, right? It is inclusive and it's fun. I do not have time to tell you some of the fun stories, but if you hang around after, I'll tell you some of the fun stories I've had with a variety of spiritual holidays and that sort of stuff. I have fun with it. So it's not, oh man, I have to pray and meditate. It's like, woo, that's right. Like, do it till it's fun. Do it till it's exciting. I got to start with consistency, but man, it's rad. And I know it's like you kind of, ooh, prayer and meditation, and I'm over here like, rad, woo, I was a little, anywho. So that's the directions for on awakening. Now we get into the directions for what we do as we go throughout the day. So as we go throughout the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful. I don't know about you. I needed a seated meditation practice to have morning and night before I was able to have any sort of pause during the day. And again, maybe y'all don't have the sort of all over the place sort of brain that I seem to have, but that's what I needed to do. I needed to have that seated practice to allow me to have that pause. And I'm big in the 12 and 12. It talks about how prayer, meditation, and inventory, when they're logically interwoven and intertwined, they create that unshakable foundation. I need that meditation to help me pause. But it says, pause when agitated or doubtful and ask. That's another prayer. So we're going to ask for the right thought or action. We constantly, that means that this is something that's going with me as I go throughout the day, perhaps a little like a mantra, which sounds a little bit meditative. Just throwing that out there. Feel free to ignore me as I'm pointing to these different things. We constantly remind ourselves that we are no longer running the show. When did I get fired? Step 3, I got my pink slip. Some of you guys physically got a pink slip because I make them. Humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. Now let's pop over real quick to page 85 when we're talking about step 10 and we have that step 10 prayer. And it's right when it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action, that paragraph, it says, how can I best serve thee? Thy will not mine be done. That sort of prayer ties in together. And we see that beautiful mirror between step 10 and step 11 and how they work together. We are then in much less danger of excitement, which I know some of you guys are like, excitement? I can use a little of that. Now keep in mind, and I'm sure you are all very responsible and never made any impulsive decisions based on excitement. I'm sure no one ever like changed jobs or relationships or just whatever, excitement, you know, those impulses, woo, off I go. And then fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. Now we know fear and anger, right? We know that fear is that thief that robs me of the joy, robs me of this moment. And anger, we know resentment is the #1 offender, destroys more alcoholics than anything else. But it's also important that we do not minimize these things. Worry, that's just fear. You know, I don't go to inventory at Page. I'm not afraid. I'm just a little worried. And I'm thinking about it all day, every day, all day, every day, all day, but it's not affecting me all day, every day. You know what I'm saying? And it talks about self-pity. Oh goodness, self-pity has been one of the most dangerous and destructive defects of character that I've ever had. Man, I have had to make amends for behaviors that I've done while on a self-pity bender. And why self-pity is so destructive for somebody like me is because it's that warm blanket, you know, that initial warm blanket, but it turns into a noose. It feels good at first. And don't all these defects feel good at first until I know I'm in trouble. So we do not, so it says we become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. We're tying back to page 61. We're talking about the actor playing the director, me trying to sit in the God chair, the delusion of the God chair. And it's one of those things, if I'm not sure whether or not I'm in self-will, a helpful thing for me was to realize if I am tired without a good reason. Now, some of you guys know I actually struggle with like chronic fatigue and I have health issues, but if I don't have a good reason for being tired, it's usually an indication that I have been running in self-will. I know some of you guys are like, girl, I did not want that information today. I just wanted to have a nap, but I didn't want to have to do inventory. You can do both, nap then inventory. All right, but that's the thing. This way of life is efficient. It is far more efficient to write inventory. It is far more efficient to have a daily prayer and meditation life than it is to try to play God like how I was. And actually, there's this quote, I believe it's the Dalai Lama, who said, you know, every human being should meditate at least 20 minutes a day, unless you're really, really, really busy, in which case you should meditate an hour a day. Yeah, yeah, which is like so true because it really is. The more that I spend with God, the more effective I am, the more efficient I am, and the more time that I have throughout the day. I don't know about you, but that has been beyond my experience. So we do not tire so easily. We're burning up energy foolishly as we did. We're trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. Again, playing God. It works. It really does. There's a lot of stuff that I don't got time for. I don't got energy for. I don't do things that don't work, but I do this. And it's been like over 7 years where I have not missed daily prayer, daily meditation, daily evening review, morning, evening prayer, you know, meditation. I have not missed that. And now I can listen when I say some of you are like, girl, you would be easily institutionalized. I know I do well with the routine. But the thing is, I could not go without it. It works. I don't do things that do not work. Prayer works. Meditation works. Inventory works. And when I'm doing all three, it is incredible. My thought life, I mean, the only thing that ever in my entire life took suicide off the table for me was consistency in those actions. That's the only thing that ever did it. And I tried a whole lot of other things. And that was the only thing that ever did it. It works. It really does. Sneaky little improvements. We alcoholics are undisciplined. How did they know? How did they know? Us? No. So we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined. That consistency with doing this thing on a daily basis. But that is not all. There's action and more action. Oh, darn it. I was for sure thinking we'd be done with the action after this whole into action chapter. Action and more action. Faith without works is dead. And that whole theme, faith without action, and I will relapse. So I can have belief in God, belief in the power of 12-step, belief. But if I do not take these actions, I will relapse. And I'll be, just experientially, I'll be pretty miserable before I do. So it says, the next chapter is entirely devoted to step 12. And we'll dive into step 12 next week. So I'll stop the recording and we can wrap it up with a prayer. Thanks for, that was share screen. It's like, I've been doing this. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Keep coming back. I know I will.